All right, welcome back. This is the Virtual Residency Workshop 2023. It's Monday, June 26th. This is the final presentation of the day. I want to welcome Dylan Perkins to talk to us about Cyberinfrastructure user support. Take it away, Dylan.
Yeah, thanks, Henry. As Henry mentioned, I'm Dylan Perkins. I'm the Associate Director of User Services at Research Computing at CU Boulder, University of Colorado Boulder. And I gave this talk last year. I made a couple of changes to it this year, not too drastically. But what I really want is to have this be fairly interactive. You can use the chat to do that. I think we have a couple polls coming up. So feel free to jump in whenever you'd like. So let me share my screen. And I will get started here. Close the presenter view so I can see all of you. Awesome. Okay. So the intent of this talk is to give sort of a high-level overview of what user support is in cyber infrastructure, especially in research cyber infrastructure. There's going to be a whole lot of high-level concepts, not a whole lot of detailed advice or anything like that, but just things to keep in the back of your head if this happens to be your job or you're working with people like this. I will apologize ahead of time. I do have a 1-year-old dog in the room, and if he starts barking, I will need to kick him out of here. So just be prepared for that. Okay, so I kind of wanted to get started with my story and how I got to be here today. Obviously, in high school, I didn't know what I was doing like a lot of other kids. I thought that my job would be working outside. Never wanted to be behind a computer ever in my life. Well, that changed over the course of the years, and I'll show you how. Immediately after high school, I went to a community college. I didn't know what I was doing or what to do, so I went with the cheapest route option, and I paid for everything out of my pocket, which was very nice. But I changed majors over and over again. And after a few years of doing that, I kind of settled on geography. Why? Because I like maps. That was the whole reason. And I finally did get an undergraduate degree in geography at the University of Wyoming, where I'm from. But at the end of that, I realized that I didn't know as much as I felt like I wanted to. So I applied to grad school. And at the time, the only place that would really accept me is the people that knew me already. They accepted me as an unfunded student. I expected to pay for college and my master's degree, just like I had with my community college and undergraduate degree. I was able to graduate with my undergraduate with only like $4,000 in student loans. So I was able to pay those off really quickly. So that was an accomplishment of itself. But during that time, as a master's student, there was a fairly large EPSCoR grant that was going on. And it was right after the White House had its referendum on sharing data and data management and how people need to be managing their data if they're funded through the federal government. So what that group decided to do was, okay, well, we have this unfunded student that happens to be pretty good at GIS and databases. We will just pay him to go to college and not have to worry about him funding himself. Didn't know what I was doing. They took the cheapest option available and hired a grad student to do that. At the end of that, though, well, in the middle of my master's degree, you can see it took me 5 years. I was hired at a research computing center to do the same sort of work, but not for just the one group, but for everyone on campus. Before this time, I have rarely ever opened a terminal. I learned to program during my master's degree and kind of got to learning that stuff. But while working with this group, they realized that I had some other skills that would be useful for user support, and that was a bigger need for that group at the time. So they audited my position and created this new one of end user support manager, where I finally got to thrive a little bit using the skills that I didn't know I had, and be able to help researchers get their work done. And after a while of doing that, I saw a job opportunity at an R1 institution. We just been through the pandemic. I realized that people could work remotely, and I applied for an associate director job, thinking that my years of experience in user support would be sufficient enough, which it is in some levels, but being a leader is a different sort of animal than being a troubleshooter support person. I learned that my job changed from working with researchers every single day on helping them solve their problems to writing PowerPoints and emails to just about anyone and everyone. So what I'm trying to get at here is that none of us really know that these jobs exist, and user support is one of these jobs that really provide value to researchers and universities and other places, that you don't have to have a traditional background in these things. They can come from all over the place. So I think I have a poll here. Henry, if you wanted to pull that up, that would be great. I want to ask everyone in the group here, is CI user support important? Give about 30 more seconds for people to answer.
Let me know when you want me to close it out and display the result.
I think I can do that here as co-hosts. Cool. Let me share the results. Okay, so it looks like many of you answered yes, absolutely. Obviously, if we're having a talk about it during virtual residency, it ought to be, right? Some of you say it's nice to have, and it depends, one person said. Well, let me share with you a result. Oh, that's not right. What does the chat say? Sure, no question. Strongly agree. Oh yeah, yes, to me, that's why I get paid. Awesome. So I would argue that it is fairly important. You can build things and build the best supercomputer you could possibly build with your budget. But if people don't know how to use it, did you waste your money? Right? So that's why user support is important to me. Well, what does user support do? Well, generally speaking, like I said, this is high level. We have 3 roles: education, consulting, and outreach, right? As the most visible / available CI professionals to researchers, user support teams often act as the front door to these systems and other staff, right? We're the first people to get the tickets, or the people out doing the outreach, talking, giving presentations, going into guest lectures, doing all sorts of things like that. So I think I have another poll here. Is CI user support less important than other CI staff? We'll have about a minute to answer here.
Are you driving this poll or should I?
In the poll.
I'm doing it right now. Got it. Sorry about that. Okay, coming up on a minute here. Share the results here. So, looks like most folks said that they're equal. There's a few people that said yes, it's less important. Some of you say it depends, and some say no, they are more important. I have a little bit of a research to show that can prove that they're somewhat important. So in 2019, my predecessor, Shelley Knuth, wrote a paper based on some of the findings that we found that says user support is critical to the operations of any CI center. Improvements in our operations, like our documentation, our trainings, and automation, resulted in a 31% increase in allocation requests. So what does this mean? In some cases, as Henry mentioned earlier this morning, some people do not have on-premise research computing systems. They use the cloud, right? But they still have to have somewhat of a support staff to help facilitate that research in the cloud. And the better the user support gets, the more use you get out of it. Making that translation from, as Henry said, the phone to the command line or whatever other tools you use is very important for getting research moving along and reducing the time to science. So a little bit more specific, but than the general roles that I gave earlier, is a little bit of a wide-ranging set of skills that user support people have to have. Being good at one of these things will help you along, but many of these roles often shift minute by minute basis and maybe sometimes over longer periods of time. The roles I've identified are a translator, a teacher, a troubleshooter, an outreach coordinator, and a conflict resolution specialist. So that's our agenda. We're going to talk about some of these specific roles for these things I just mentioned. We'll include some frequently encountered problems, various experiences, and important skill sets. We'll also come up with some common expectations and then summarize all these together. So let's get into the translator. So researchers and CI professionals often have different nomenclature that can lead to ambiguity, confusion, and frustration. This becomes even more challenging when backgrounds and cultural differences are present. So a few things that I wanted to highlight here is that, the word Delta could mean several different things in different disciplines and can mean something different in CI. For example, Delta could be a symbol of change, right? Which is something that we're mostly familiar with. But Delta could also be the measure of nitrogen in the atmosphere, I think is what atmospheric sciences use, Delta. Cultural backgrounds, right, are very different too. Some people don't have English as their first language. So you might say something that may mean something different in a different language. A few things here to highlight for skills is you want to be aware of your sound processes. your cultural awareness, curiosity, your ability to research what the person you're talking with. Obviously, some IT skills, attention to detail, dependability, adaptability, integrity, professional pride, organization, and motivation, excellent writing skills. And I took this image here from PackTrans. What do we have here in the chat? Oh, okay. Okay, so here's an example of a translation problem. So on a real researcher's website, the purpose of this proposed study is to explore word identification of misarticulated words by children with SSD. A CI professional might pick out the acronym SSD and assume that the researcher is wanting to use fast storage in a high I/O workflow. But given our research skills, we can read further and that this researcher is a speech language pathologist, and to them, SSD means speech sound disorders. So they may not be looking at the CI professional to provide these things. I'm using this example because this person is my lovely spouse, and it was great to hear Bruce's talk just prior to this because she was just awarded tenure last month. So it's been a long, stressful journey for her. But, you know, the same can happen in reverse, right? So here's a scenario where an HPC software manager might recommend to user support personnel that a researcher should use Singularity to accomplish their work. I know Singularity is not the new name for it now, it's Aptainer, but just as an example, this is our translation. So some researchers might think that Singularity might mean something referring to general relativity or other concepts that doesn't mean a software container. So I believe I have another poll here. On how the user support professional should assist the researcher given this complex concept, sorry. We'll give a little bit more time on this one since there's a lot more options. We'll say I'm very pleased with everyone, with nobody picking the I'm afraid to answer honestly option. Okay, in the interest of time, I will end the poll for now and share what people have picked. Tell the researcher exactly what the software manager says to do. Nobody picked that. Tell a researcher to look up containers and adjust accordingly. Nobody picked that. Here, go help yourself is basically what that says. Install it yourself. A few of you did that, and we've done that before in the past. Meet with the researcher and explain what the container is. Direct them to training about containers that you're hosting later in the semester. Point them into documentation, some version of all the above. It depends. I would say the answer is some version of all the above. In fact, I feel that when working with researchers, the more information you can give them, the better. However, you don't want to overload them with analysis paralysis, right? I would definitely meet with them. I'd point to some documentation, say that there is training, just give them all the resources that they can. What you don't want to do is leave them out to dry, right? You want to be able to be there to help them get their science done. Okay, what do we have in the chat here? Usually refer to documentation and chat. Yes, of course. Not see the word listen in that poll. We will be getting to the listen here in a minute. Thank you. Okay. So we mentioned background and cultural differences. It's not something you can really help, but it's important to be mindful of these things. Not all disciplines are as open to sharing as others in ideas, right? Some folks will think that you're trying to scoop their research from them and will not give you enough information to really help assist them. Some people just have personality differences. Some folks are extroverts and some are introverts and some versions of in between. Do we really want to talk to somebody? Do we want to have these meetings all the time? It's it's always changing. Like I mentioned, primary and secondary languages. Cultural and background may also impede the communication, as I mentioned. Some cultures will think that by giving you more information, help you translate what I'm trying to do, means that I'm dumb or something like that. So just something to be aware of. Several skill sets that will really help with this: attention to detail, adaptability, curiosity, motivation. You got to be motivated to help do this translation, right? If you're just here to listen and do whatever they ask, whatever, you want to be able to actually empower the researcher to do their things. Excellent writing. Make sure that you're using sentences that people can relate to and things like that. Yeah, expectation setting is a big one here. Differences in learning styles as well. Yeah, when we get to the teacher part, I will talk about learning styles as well. Okay. Here's some methods for you. You want to reduce jargon and acronyms. Like I mentioned, the acronyms and jargon could be really difficult to translate. You want to use some analogies. I will say a little bit of a warning. Almost all analogies will break down eventually, right? Nothing's going to be perfect. But to get the basic concept across, analogies are a great way of communicating. You want to check for understanding, right? You don't want to just ask, do you understand? You want to say something more like, do you think you can do this going forward? Or do you understand what I mean when I say this? Things that are more specific that somebody can respond to and not a yes, no answer, right? Active listening is really important here. You want to respond using paraphrasing and I statements, not you statements. Instead of like, you told me that this is what you need. It's like, I heard you say that this is what you need. You want to ask clarifying questions, right? So ask furthermore, like, what package are you using and why are you using it, right? And is there a different way of going about this? Is there only this way? I think a lot of this you'll get in some of the later talks this week, especially with Dirk's talks. All right, the teacher. Let's talk about this role of user support. Often act as teachers, right? The purpose of this role is to provide researchers with knowledge and to enable them, right? We want to enable research to happen. We don't want to do it for them or handhold people through every question they have. Obviously, Common tools are workshops and trainings, guest lectures, one-on-one consultations, which we alluded to earlier with the meet with the researcher, that fit this role. However, there's some challenges in teaching, right? One of those is motivation. We mentioned motivation already, but the question is, why is it worth it? What's the value that you're providing in providing a teaching role? What are the commitments it's going to take, right? While developing a brand new workshop can be very time consuming, and especially when you're trying to consider multiple skill sets and how to best accommodate all of them. But what are really the consequences of not doing it, right? Does that mean that the research doesn't get done? Does that mean that people are using systems inefficiently? Why is it worth it question? Format, right? What's the best delivery question? Is this something that can be simply written up in documentation? Does it need to be a large workshop that have multiple people in it? Does it need to be more intimate with the lab, right? So that you can address specific questions. There's obviously multimedia things going on now too, where you can record videos and other things that people use and kind of have this on-demand sort of service as well. The effectiveness challenge. Was the goal achieved? Are we meeting people's expectations? Do they know what they're expecting to get out of it to begin with? Do they know what the value is? Do you know that they actually understand what was being taught here? And improvement. Every time we give workshops, we always ask the question, what could be better? This is a little bit challenging beyond just how to do it. Obviously, assessment and feedback are kind of your important tools here on how to improve each time you do a teaching. So let's get into a little bit more into motivation. The teacher must be motivated to provide the knowledge. Additionally, the users must be motivated to take advantage of the opportunities. I don't know how many times we've advertised for a training that we think could be really beneficial for everyone, but people don't know what it is, right? We can do this workshop on containers, but do they want to take advantage of that opportunity? So the motivation for user support is the time reduction, right? If you provide the education, you'll get less tickets, hopefully, right? That's sort of the goal here. Obviously, a really big one for me and for my team is psychological fulfillment, right? It's just really nice to get that sort of satisfaction out of sharing knowledge. But it's also building relationships here too, right? If you're interacting with somebody just over email and you actually get in a room with someone, you actually get to know a little bit more about them and have that relationship built. For the users, obviously you want to remove barriers for them and give them some self-sufficiency. So they don't have to ask you for help all the time. They can just go in and get their science done. I should be saying research and not science, because there's more disciplines that could be taking advantage of CI for their research. Formats, right? They vary widely, as I mentioned. Documentation, workshops, and multimedia. There's advantages and disadvantages to each. I will say that there's not a silver bullet that works for everyone, which is what was mentioned in the chat earlier. But here's a few examples, right? In documentation, it's persistent, it's adaptable, it's accessible, and translatable. When I say translatable, I mean somebody who doesn't have English as their first language can click the Google Translate button on their browser and make it easier for them to understand. It can serve a lot of audiences, but not everybody learns from just reading and understanding the content as intended. Live workshops, online or in-person scheduled events. What's great about these is that the engagement is live. Questions can be answered quickly, right in the middle of the workshop, and understanding can be checked, making sure that people are understanding what we're giving them. Problems with this, though, is scheduling, right? Many of us work 8-to-5 jobs. Not everyone that's using our systems or taking advantage of our services can do that. There's, single mothers out there that can only really get to things at 2 a.m., right? There's obviously the language and accessibility barriers. It's gotten better with online stuff, right? Right now, somebody can go to this meeting right now and click turn on captions, and obviously reference material. Multimedia could be a hybrid of both, right? Videos and published presentations, things like that. Once again, persistent, accessible, referenceable. It takes a lot of time to produce videos. Something I've learned in my career is that not only do you need to have the plan ahead of time, but you need to have a plan of how it can persist. How long will it be before your video is irrelevant and you have to take it down and do something new? Compliance issues also come into play here. I know at Colorado Boulder, every video that we publish has to be captioned and accurately captioned so that it can meet accessibility requirements. Obviously, also, we don't really record our live events like we are doing today, mostly because of FERPA issues that the university wants us to get away from. So what we're doing now is that we have found some software that helps us do the captioning and planning out what we're doing ahead of time. But obviously, one of the biggest cons here is that you don't get that live feedback in the middle of a video that people would say it's useful or not. Okay. Effectiveness. Meeting the expectations and understanding are key contributors to the effectiveness of teaching CI concepts. You want to communicate the value. You want to communicate prerequisites, and content are vital to setting expectations. So why are users interested and what do they already know? These are really hard to determine, right? You can guess what people would be interested in. You can't really guess what they already know. Sometimes you can, but it's really, really hard. And understanding is even more difficult to confirm. Are they being engaged? Are they asking questions? How much content was delivered over how much time? I know that we've done a few workshops in my past that was really in depth and covered a lot, but it was over the course of an hour. And for people in that workshop, it was like drinking from a fire hose, right? It's very difficult to understand everything. Did they provide any feedback, and did the teacher check for understanding, right? Another thing that we've started doing this year is that I met with our teaching and learning center on campus and asked about how do we do assessments of our workshops. One thing that we're trying is we have sent everyone that took a workshop from us in the fall this spring a short survey. One of the questions was, do you use what you learned in this workshop every day in your everyday life now? We only got about 10% of response rate from everyone that we sent it to, which is not great, but obviously in survey world, that's not bad. But what was encouraging is that almost all of them, the majority, said that, yes, this was useful. And yes, I do use it in my everyday work now. So that's another thing that you could be doing, is checking to see how effective you are and which workshops are the more effective ones and adapt the other ones. So improvement. Nothing's going to be perfect, nor will it probably ever be. But you can always seek to improve yourselves with your content or your delivery. Methods for improving are also never perfect, but if you can help, self-assessment, how do you feel it went or is going? You can change on the fly. If you're in the middle of teaching something and you hear the gray matter coming out of people's ears because they just aren't understanding, back it up a little bit. Adapt on the fly if you're doing something live. User provided feedback is always helpful. Like I mentioned, that survey. Other thing that we do here is peer review. We have another person usually sit in on another person's workshop and provide additional feedback from a source familiar with the content. So it's really helpful to really have that different perspective as well. Some skills that are really helpful in teaching: communication, listening, make sure you're hearing what people are saying back to you. You want to collaborate with not just your colleagues, but also the people you're giving the content to. It'd be really nice if you could teach me this, or can you talk about this? Adapt, make sure you're engaging, empathetic. Obviously, you got to try to put yourself in other people's shoes, and patience. Be very patient. You can't expect that, yes, I gave this workshop in the fall, and how come this person's not able to do this in the spring? They might need reminders. Okay, moving on to a different role now. Before I do so, let's see what the chat has to say. A preference for X or Y, but Z is the thing that's going to be best. Yeah, you got to be agnostic. That's very important. Thanks, Mark. Okay. I mentioned this before, but user support is usually the most visible members of a CI team. Fills the initial role of troubleshooting for many researchers, right? It's the first ticket that we get. Hey, how do I help this? Or I can't get this to work. The user support person is usually the first one to pick it up. Obviously, in consultations, it'd be like, yes, would you like to meet to talk about what the problems you're facing? And it's usually the user support people that do that might need to bring in some systems facing staff. So biggest thing to highlight here in troubleshooting is what's the problem we're trying to solve. Identifying the problem. And determine what type of problem it is before offering solutions or seeking guidance. There's two types of problems, in my opinion, for user support. They're technical problems, where there's system malfunctions, software issues, or there's networking or security issues. And then there's user problems, right? There could be ability problems. There could be misuse and abuse. Somebody's being malicious in what they're trying to do. Or workflow is just inefficient and the design could be reworked. So technical problems. Occasionally, the first sign that something is wrong with a CI system is that a user reports about anomalies. Typically, if there's a system problem, there will be multiple reports of something similar, but not always. They can look like a user problem at first, but that may not always be the case. And I'll give you a few examples here. I can't log in. Is that a user problem or a technical problem? I can't access my files. My jobs won't run. I'm having trouble transferring my data. And my personal favorite, I'm sure I'm doing something silly, right? These could be technical problems, even though the user's reporting that it could be their own problem. So how do we address these issues? Sometimes user support can, but not always. Attempting to replicate the user problem is often the best first step in identifying technical problems. If the problem can be replicated, having a good working relationship with the system-facing staff is very important, or you want to report the issue and communicate with the user. Hey, I'm having this person face these issues. Can somebody please look into it? I'm not sure what to do here. And then you obviously want to follow up with the user, communicating that, hey, there seems to be a problem that we've identified. We're working on it. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. If the problem can't be replicated, it could still be a technical issue. Not sure, but you want to ask for more details and seek assistance from other people on the CI team that might have different experience than yours, or national communities, which I think I added more information about that later on today. So troubleshooting user errors is also a key function. In some situations, it can be difficult to determine the error. If the problem can't be replicated, like I mentioned before, we should seek more details. Once again, I can't log in. Is that somebody messing up their password? Please install the software I need. What if the software is already installed? Do they know how to call a module file or whatever they need? I've been waiting in the queue for a week. Is that because they scheduled their job inefficiently, or is it their fair share or other things that could be going on? And then my personal favorite, that most likely a user problem sometimes, is there something wrong with the system? It could be a system problem, but oftentimes they could be user problems as well. They could be numerous and unpredictable. Excuse me 1 second. And oftentimes, back and forth email exchanges are frustrating, not just to the user, but also the staff as well. So approaching user problems should be handled with nuanced and empathetic approaches. An example here of something I've used before. I'm sorry you're experiencing trouble. Would you like to schedule a meeting to work through the problem? Thank you for reporting this issue. I'd like to get more information if I can. Do you have time to show me what you're dealing with? So what we're doing here is taking the approach of, oh, I'm sorry, that's terrible. What can I do to help you? Is there more information you can give me? Things like that. Some skills for troubleshooting. First off, you don't want to panic. If there is a technical issue that brought down the entire cluster or the storage is going haywire, remain calm. Make sure there is really a problem. Know the CI that you're working with to the best of your ability. You could probably determine some things that if you know something that's going on based on your experience, you want to look for clues either in what people are reporting or in monitoring software or other things. Don't be afraid to ask questions. This is the most important thing I tell my staff. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't try to solve a problem on your own if you don't know what's going on. And you want to be humble about your abilities. Yes, I know what I'm doing with all this stuff, and I don't have to ask the question, but no, just be humble a little bit and know when to seek the assistance. Okay, before I move on, let's see. How do you bridge the gap between advanced and novice users? Yeah, that's very hard. Typically, most of our workshops and other things are, or even our troubleshooting, we try to start with the novice first and then escalate it up as we see it happening. We try to do more general workshops, especially in training, that are at the lower level. One thing I definitely did this last year was a what I called summer camp, right? Where we had basic topics and scaled it up hour after hour, day after day. So started with, this is how you get an account, and finished with, this is how you check to see how efficient your jobs is running and what other advances that you can go with. But yes, that's a very difficult thing to do, because I've seen people come to workshops that have advanced knowledge and get there and then walk out because it's too basic, and vice versa, or we've tried to provide something more advanced and then somebody that didn't know what the heck we were talking about walk out because it was too advanced for them. So thank you. Yeah, that's a tough one. So the outreach coordinator, some universities have dedicated people to provide outreach that would otherwise be the user support's responsibility. But even if that's the case, outreach is still important for user support in different scenarios. So we want to ask ourselves some questions here. How are users made aware that your team exists? Right? I can't tell you how many times we've gone into a department and talked to the department head and said, we want to speak to your your faculty and your students would be time for us and like, well, who are you and why do you even here? One thing that's really beneficial for me at CU Boulder is that we have this really strong and ongoing partnership with our libraries. And one thing that most people know about in universities is that the libraries exist. Given that partnership, we're able to reach a wider range of people and know when to direct people towards one another. How would a user know if they can even use CI in the research? Right? This is where you want to kind of look at some examples in the wild, maybe read some papers, talk about other things that are going on in the news that could be adapted to other people's research. Do they even know where to look for help, right? Do they know that they can email this question? Do they know how they can submit a ticket? Do they know who to ask? Several things that you want to think about when you're doing outreach. Is there a way for users to know what workshops and trainings are available? And that's one of our one of my bread and butter ways of doing outreach is that we are teaching something that people are interested in. And how do people know? Can users subscribe to email updates or social media? Are there ways for people to find this information, right? Things that you want to talk about when you're doing outreach, and especially at the end for people to get updates on what's going on. And does the team even know who to reach out to? Most of the time not, right? You know, the power players on your as your user base, but do you know the people that could be taking advantage of other things that they typically aren't? Yeah. So there's many potential answers to these questions, and challenges persist in many ways. If you say maintain a listserv of all of the users you have on your systems, I know that I ignore some listserv emails. Even if it's very important information, it's really hard to keep up with everything because the balance of over communicating versus under. Do we want to tell everybody everything that's going on? They're going to start ignoring everything that we're saying. If you don't communicate enough, people will think that it's spam email. Being aware of groups that are around. You know, they're not just departments, but there's also schools and other centers and stuff like that that exist on many campuses around the country, probably the world. And obviously, is it necessary for us to reach out to them? Is it viable? Do we need to talk to groups that could be taking advantage of things or help correct behaviors or something like that? So here's a few strategies. I say do all of these. Listservs are convenient. You can manage communications, but they present challenges. Still a good strategic method for outreaching to users. Social media is a strange place. I've ran Facebook and Twitter accounts for our center before. It's good for some folks, but it takes constant work to stay relevant. You need to be posting, you need to be interacting. It's a job in and of itself. Some folks may not think they have the need for social media or even the desire. It's pretty tough. Targeting potential groups can be done in many ways. I think Henry said this earlier this morning, but looking at research websites, finding out words that people are using to see if it's somewhat related. One of my favorite ways is that when you see an announcement that your university says like X researcher got X number of dollars to do this sort of research, that's potentially somebody that you want to reach out to. And obviously research articles that people are publishing, and if they're doing something computationally that could be scaled up if they want to. It's probably something for you to reach out to. But by far the most important thing, in my opinion, is word of mouth. Researchers will talk to each other, whether you like it or not. They will. You want to build goodwill with the folks that are aware of you. Why? Because then when they do talk to their colleagues, they will speak highly of you and your group. How do you build goodwill? By providing great service through user support, making sure that people are getting their work done, enabling them. So here's some skills for some outreach. Organizing. You want to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row before you start doing some of this outreach. Storytelling. I always tell one story that I worked with a graduate student for a long time. They came to my office hours every week for about 2 semesters for a whole year. And when they finally went off on their own, I didn't hear anything until I saw a news report in Forbes magazine talking about their research, which was really sort of a proud papa moment for me. Those are some of the stories that you can tell to other people when you're doing these outreach things. You want to repeat things. You want to say it early. You want to say it often. You want to communicate community awareness. You want your community to be aware of you or discover who's not aware of you. Market yourself, sell yourself, and identify the correct sort of customers, right? That could be reached out to. So I've added this one a little bit too, the conflict resolution specialist. May not think that this is part of user support, but I've found it to be fairly frequent. So we can deal with situations of conflict, whether that's between users, the team, or both. The ability to recognize conflict and have strategies to mitigate it is a valuable skill for user support. So here's some scenarios that we'll go through together. A user complains that they've not been able to do their work because someone is hogging all the nodes. Scenario 2, user support is reporting that there may be an issue on the system, but the technical staff says there's nothing to worry about and to tell the users that they're being dramatic. That one seems a bit extreme, but that specific example did happen to me once. A user is asking for help from the technical staff because they don't believe that user support can help them, right? So while it's important, while you can take offense to some of these scenarios, it's important to remain professional and rebuild any relationships that could be impacted. It's also important to know what questions user support should ask themselves before reacting to a situation. So in scenario 1, the user complains that they have not been able to do all their work because someone else is hogging all of their nodes. Okay. I skipped a couple polls, but that's okay. So what should we do in this situation? Question to ask ourselves before attempting a response. Is there a technical issue with the scheduler? Is the defendant really misusing the system? How can we set expectations for the plaintiff, right? I've seen it happen a few times where somebody's is a power user and been using the systems over and over again, and their priority on the system has gone down because they have been using it so much, and somebody who's been sitting waiting for a long time finally gets to join. Is there a situation where somebody asks for all of the GPU nodes because they want to do this big, large scale analysis and nobody else can use them? Is there something that you can change that would address the issue? Is there not? What do we need to do here? And make sure that we tell the people that are complaining about this what the expectations are, what's the expected behavior. Or if there really is a problem with misuse, then you need to go to that other person and try to help resolve this conflict or help them optimize things so that it could be better used in a shared environment. So in scenario 2, does anybody have any other suggestions for scenario 1? Just open it up here to chat. Who else have seen something similar in their job before? Somebody's using all of the stuff and I can't. What the resource request looks like? Absolutely. Update documentation? Absolutely. Okay. Ask them to read the docs before sending a troubleshooting ticket. Great. Okay. In conflict scenario 2, user support is reporting that there may be an issue on the system, but the system's facing staff says there's nothing to worry about and tell the users that they're being dramatic. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold this last week. Like I said before, this has actually happened to me before. And I went to the sysadmin going like, hey, these people aren't able to do anything. I got like 5 of them. They're really complaining because they're not able to get their work done. It could be a very simple thing. That's not really how we want to respond to this, right? So what questions do we want to ask ourselves? If we get this response from our systems facing staff, one thing we need to ask ourselves is there a trust issue between us? Do they not believe what we're saying? Why is that? How can we help mitigate that problem? Why does the technical staff think there isn't a problem? Is there something that we're not aware of? And how do we respond to users that isn't offensive like that? Things that we could think about before we react to. In this situation that I faced, I described the situation back to the technical staff and asked why there wasn't a problem. Can you please elaborate? And then was able to respond to the users going, look, there is a little bit of a blip here. Nothing really to be too concerned about. This is how you can get around it. Regularly logging. Yep. So, oops, I have a typo here. This is scenario 3. A user is asking for help from technical staff because they don't believe user support can help them. Kind of going around the role here. This has happened to me once before. Made me feel like I wasn't doing my job well enough. Really sort of hurt me a little bit. But what do we do in this situation? Once again, is there a trust issue? Have we let this user down before? How do we work to repair that relationship? What I did in my previous role where I was doing this, I did end up helping solve a different problem for them. And then they were more likely to come back to me instead of going around me. What's the actual problem? And can we even assist? Like, is there a reason why they're going to the technical staff? We want to rebuild the trust. And how do we respond? Right? It could be like, I've been in communication with the system facing people. This is what we think we can do. Can you run a test and let me know? And we can work on this all together, right? So here's some skills for conflict resolution. Once again, remain calm. Listen carefully to everything that's going on. Don't think it's personal. Nobody's personally attacking you. You don't want to accuse somebody You don't want to attack them either. Or prioritize resolving the conflict over being right. Like, this is more important, right? You got to be willing to compromise, know when to apologize and forgive, and remember the importance of maintaining the relationship. Like, that's the most important thing in all of this, is that you want people to trust you and come back to you when they have issues. So I have a few examples of some common expectations. I think we're about at an hour, so we have about 15 more minutes left. So we'll go through these and then open it up for questions. Some expectations differ by role, and I just generally put faculty and students in two different categories. For faculty, sometimes commit to what I want to do so I can write my proposal or do it my way. We work with a lot of smart people, and they often have ideas on how things should be done. It's important to engage it, but not to like commit to this is what the price will be of this storage system because you say it will be, right? You have to give reasons why maybe the price of your storage is different than theirs because it's enterprise hardware, not commodity. We do backups and other things like that. My discipline needs X. Why doesn't your system support it? I've seen a few things like this software only runs on Windows. How come your Linux system won't do it? Teach my students this stuff so I don't have to. That's somewhat fair, right? There's new people coming into the lab every year, every semester. And they want to continue the work and not have to stop each semester, teach somebody new to get a little bit ahead and do it over and over again. And respond to me, I'm important, right? I am a faculty member. I bring in lots of money. That's one that you want to respond to. You want to be able to meet this expectation for faculty. For students, help me write my code. It's too hard to use on your system, right? You don't want to give that expectation that you will handhold them all the way through. I've seen this before. I have homework. Can you help me with it? No, we're here for research, not for homework. Why don't you ask your TA? Why can't you make it work like my laptop or my cell phone, right? This is what I'm used to. I have this GUI. I click this button. How come it doesn't work the same way? So this is new this year. I wanted to provide some other resources for folks out there, for user support people. Who's heard of Access before? Who's heard of Exceed before? Go ahead and put that in the chat. Or raising your hand. All right, I think I said two different things. Who's heard of Access? Yes, both. Heard of Access but not Exceed. Awesome. Okay. Access used to be Exceed, not quite, but kinda. So I am a contributor to Access. I am part of one of these services in support. It's organized into 4 different tracks, I guess you want to say. We have allocations, which are people who allow researchers to get on some of these nationally available systems. We have support, which is new. I don't know if Exceed really had a support sort of track here, where we did do training in Exceed, but user assistance. And what we have here also is the Computational Science Support Network, which is something I'm going to bring up here in a minute. We have operations. These are the people doing the day-to-day operations of networking and data support and cybersecurity. And we have metrics, people that can see how things are working, right? And we're all sort of working in collaboration with the coordination office, who do a lot of the communications outreach and then have the advisory board and executive council. So what happened, Exceed was funded for 11 years, I think. And then there became a new call to provide the same sort of support, but then there was an additional thing on getting the community involved. And what we mean by community is not just us people that are facilitators and admins and CI professionals, but also the researchers themselves. We try very hard in Access to not use the exceed term. Is there a hand raised, or is that just a response to one of my questions? Okay. So I'm going to highlight support here. My name's listed under this track. I want you to look at this pyramid not as a pyramid, but more of the number of people that it affects. So what we're saying our tier 1 is that we try to provide easy to use tools. One of those being open on demand, if you've heard of that before, a browser based interface that people can log into a lot of these national resources with. They're not on all national resources. We are we have to let the resource providers determine whether they want to do it or not. Pegasus, which is a workflow management tool that we provide support for. People want to know how to use it. They can come to Access, ask the question, read the documentation, look for training availabilities. Tier 2, this is where I'm most involved in, where we are maintaining a curated knowledge base, where we write our own documentation, converted some of the old Exceed documentation that was still relevant, point to the resource providers documentation, the people that are providing the HPC systems and other things. This is where we also do something called Ask CI, where it's a sort of a stack exchange for research, if you will. And this is where we advertise the trainings and things like that. So that's our second tier, which is fewer amount of people than just having tools available. And then we have this thing called Match Plus, where we match up researchers and support people. In this case, Plus is students that want to gain skills. I just recently used this for one of my people, for a researcher at CU Boulder, who asked us if we had a student that they could pay to help parallelize their code for them. With Match Plus, it's free, right? You go, since it's funded by the NSF, that's how the students get paid. And then we have Match Premier, which is a longer term thing where we match people with experts in domains. How do people get matched like this? That's the Community Science Support Network, the CSSN. You can go to Access today, go to the support portal. If you have an account, log in and join different, what we call affinity groups, being part of the community and things like that. So for user support, and why I'm highlighting this, is that if you run into a problem that you don't know how to do, there are resources available for you nationally. You can go to the Ask CI page, ask the question, submit a ticket, other things. So I have the links here. This is the Access-CI webpage, Ask CI Infrastructure, Ask Cyberinfrastructure.org, which is that forum I talked about. And I wanted to mention Perk because I am giving a longer form how to access workshop at Perk. So if you're still curious about how to actually leverage all of these resources that are available, or how to help your researchers leverage these available resources, and you're going to Perk, please feel free to stop by and participate in the workshop. We're also going to be giving short snippets of this over the course of the coming months, so that you can attend those. It'll be advertised through Access. So let's get into the summary. We have about 5 minutes left. So I want to say user support is a challenging and rewarding role in a CI team. Everything varies each day, but that's part of the fun. It's not a mundane job. Researchers are weird, right? And they try to do weird things. They're trying to be on the cutting edge or answer a new question, things like that. Must have a variety of skill sets ranging from professionalism to technical ability. I will say, when I hire people on my team, I look for the professional skills over the technical skills. It seems to me, be easier to teach somebody a technical skill than it is a professional one. Not that those professional skills can't be taught, they absolutely can. But it's just a faster turnaround for me. No size fits all solution exists for anything, so be prepared to pivot as needed. And make sure you're setting expectations. It's so vital, not of just the users, but also the people you're working with. And that's all I have. So are there any questions? Got about 4 minutes, I believe, on the schedule. I try to stay on time. Yes, similar, but not the same, correct. Well, thank you. My goal here today was to try to provide something of value. If it's I try to put effort into providing value, and that's what my entire goal here is. What's this question? How to empower users to try things themselves rather than expecting user support to do everything. Oh yeah. That's a tough one, right? I've seen it happen before where somebody has that expectation that somebody's just going to do it for me. I've seen it happen when, especially with like software installs, where somebody had an issue, couldn't figure it out, and we just do it for them. Then they come back and just expect everything to be getting done for them. I say it up front. This is what my intent of helping you out today is, so that you can try to do it on your own and you don't have to be bottlenecked by us. Yeah, support them to hopefully support themselves. Okay, can I discuss access a little bit more? Yeah. So I believe there's 12 HPC systems across the country. Some at TAC, Purdue, Indiana, San Diego, supercomputing, Georgia Tech, and others that I can't quite all remember, Kentucky. And what these are these institutional systems that are available to the national community. I've sent my researchers there that way a couple of times. It's happened, and there's like my experience, there's like two types of users for access. There are the people that are running such big things that they can't be run on a local or institutional or regional resource. They need something larger, right? Those people don't necessarily need to have a lot of support because they already know what they're doing. They're extreme. Now, the other type of user are the folks that have nothing, right? We're talking smaller regional schools and HBCUs, Hispanic serving institutions, things like that don't have that aren't an R1 and R2, that don't have the resources available for the research to get done, but they want to. Those people need a lot of support because they don't have somebody to go to on their campus. And that's one of the reasons why the support track exists. Nautilus can also be used by many folks. I think it is an NSF funded thing too. Yeah. There are also storage resources available. There are cloud resources in Jetstream, things like that. So our goal at Access is to democratize access to these national resources. That's not just the power users. Well, I got half after. I can stay on and answer more questions if there are. If not, I think we're at time, Henry.
Are there more questions from the audience about Dylan's talk? If there are, don't be shy. Just either shout them out or shove them into the chat, the Zoom chat.
Hey, Dylan, thank
Yes.
you for the excellent talk. So I have a question. How is the engagement in Access? Is it like voluntary basis or is it like appointment basis?
Sorry, what was that? Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, like if someone want to get engaged with Access, is it like volunteering or is it the appointment with Access? How is that?
Honestly, just reach out to the support portal. You can submit a ticket and just, hey, I'm interested in hearing this, and somebody will get back to you. You can also contact me directly and I can help get people going. Up on Access, I'll say I have a researcher who's interested in getting an allocation. Would I, as user-facing facilitator, be able to support them on Access? Yes, you can, if you know what you're doing. If you need help in providing that support, we're here to help you. Sorry, I'm answering Nicholas's question. That's the whole point of the presentation I'm giving at Perk, is to help people know what to do, like as a campus champion, to help get them supported. And it is encouraged. Did I answer your question, Sapana?
Yeah, I also want to know if some research facilitators from another institute, they want to contribute and get engaged in Access.
Mm-hmm.
How is that? Is it like they volunteer?
Sapana, are you asking about being like you have resources at your university that you would like to bring into Access, or are you asking about users just utilizing existing resources in Access?
Well, no, I'm asking that if someone want to be, if some research facilitator, they want to be get engaged in, say, making a documentation or
Yes. Okay.
So okay.
Yeah. So that's run through the CSSN that I mentioned before, the Community Science Support Network. So what you want to do is accessci.org, get an account. If you had an Exceed account already, it's already ported over. And then you want to join affinity groups, look at that CSSN, the Community Science Support Network. And there's even a program that we run called CSEP. It's the Community Engagement Program, where people can earn travel rewards for contributing this information. Like if you're providing a training or you're providing documentation or anything else that you would be. That's all under the support portal and Access.
Oh, great. Sorry for being not.
No worries.
Clear.
And thanks for helping with the clarifying question, Anita.
Thank you both.
Okay. I'm sure you'll hear more about Access in the landscape talk. I think is that tomorrow. I can't remember, but hopefully you will. If not, visit me at Perk if you can.
All right. Thank you so much, Dylan. And let's give Dylan a virtual round of applause. I am absolutely delighted with this session. In fact, this is a good lead in to our wrap up, which officially begins now. So I'm going to stop the recording and then restart it.